Hi everyone, I'm Deacon Tony Sincata from the Malvern Retreat House, and welcome to our Saturday morning coffee session. We have Joanne Bouvier with us and Juan Guerra also with us, and we wish you all a happy 4th of July. And having said that, we'd like to maybe just have a little bit of a roundtable discussion and just discuss what the 4th of July means to us as citizens of this great country and as Catholic Christians as well, as family people, and just give you a little bit of a witness that might be kind of identical to yours when it comes to our families living in this fine country. So I guess I'd like to begin with, we are a country that's 244 years old today, so happy birthday USA. And it's a wonderful time for families to get together. I'll bet that it's not going to be in the traditional way because of the COVID-19 crisis, of course, but we still can celebrate by just having hamburgers and hot dogs in our own backyard or even in our own living room. Because it's a holiday that we really should express in many different ways. And most importantly, thanking God for this great country that we live in.
Amen.
Okay,
Amen.
so why don't we just open this up and just have a little bit of a chat for you.
Well, 4th of July is very special to me, and I go back to my family heritage. My family's coming from Italy and Sicily, and the Statue of Liberty was always very important to me because I knew my family came through there. And that was very significant in my life until the time that I went to Italy and Sicily for the very first time. And I have to say it was a very emotional time in my life, an emotional experience as I drove through the towns that each of my grandparents came from and saw what they left behind and walking from their, although they weren't lavish homes at all, somewhat like caves, grottos, they left with just the clothes on their back, no money, and walked miles and miles to get a train to come to this country, unknown to them, with no finances, no friends, no family here, and no job security. And the courage that they had to come here for freedom and security and to come to the land of the free. I was overwhelmed. I just cried the whole time I was there.
Very powerful.
So it was,
Yeah.
4th of July is very important to me.
Did your grandparents celebrate the 4th of July?
Oh, yes.
As family? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So
they
they
were very
understood.
proud.
So they understood.
They were proud Italians, but very proud Americans.
Italian Americans, oh yeah.
Joanne, you had mentioned something I found fascinating, which was your parents spoke, or was it your grandparents spoke Italian, but
And my parents did too, with their parents.
at the house.
At the house, we lived with my dad's parents. And although my grandparents spoke Italian in front of me, and I basically understood what they were saying, they would never allow me to speak Italian. They would always say, "You're in this country, you speak this language."
Wow,
Interesting.
that is
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of regret that a little bit,
But if you lose it, if you don't use it, that's the issue.
You're Italian too, right?
Oh yeah, my grandparents, all 4 of my grandparents were born in Italy. So my parents were first generation, I'm second generation. My parents too spoke fluent Italian, and I spoke a little bit and understood a little bit when I was younger. And I was the first son, the first grandson, and I even have first cousins I've never met because I'm so much older than they are. And I left where we grew up in New York to seek my fortune in our great country. But my mother's side of the family were bakers, and my father's side of the family were cooks and restaurants and chefs. And they too came with zero, with nothing, mostly from Sicily. And one of the most interesting stories that I ever that I have personally is my mother's mom, Grandma Mary. We were sitting in her home in Amityville, Long Island, side by side, watching Neil Armstrong walk on the moon in 1969, and she started to cry. And I said, "No, what's the problem? Why are you crying?" She said, "I never thought I'd live to see something like this," because she was born in the 1890s, early 1890s,
Wow.
and she thought she saw everything. You know, from the first flight of the Wright brothers all the way to walking on the moon, and she thought that was just an incredible thing to see, especially by Americans. But one of the most important things she ever told me was happened to her in 1910 in New York City. Now, she was well into her teens and living in Little Italy with a bunch of other people, you know, growing up. And Halley's Comet was coming in 1910. There was no communication, there was no Italian newspapers, there was nothing. They thought the world was coming to an end. They had no idea. So what did they do? They went to church. And they fell on their knees asking God forgiveness before the end of the world. They thought it was Armageddon. And then, of course, it was explained to them that it was, you know, the comet came, what, every 70 years or 75 years or something like that, I can't recall. And they were very much relieved. But it was just an amazing story of where they started, all my grandparents, and where they lived, all lived long lives, God bless them. I had them for many, many years. And some lived into nearly 100 years of age, so it was a beautiful thing. And they were great cooks, great chefs, and great bakers. We ate very well.
Well, we're here representing, first of all, we're all Americans and proud to be, and I am so grateful for our country. With a name like Juan, people often say, so where are you from? And my family's from Cuba. We have a sort of a colorful story. One of our favorite movies, I think, growing up was The Sound of Music, because it involved 7 children who escaped, Nazi Germany. We were 7 children, a very musical family as well, and we basically escaped Cuba. You hear about people escaping Cuba in boats and rafts and anything. They sometimes convert cars to get over the strait between Cuba and Miami, and those are that survive. In our case, it was the early days of the revolution in 1961, and I'm giving away my age a little bit. It was impossible to leave Cuba because initially everyone that had the ability and the finances left Cuba, but out of a country, I think, of 7 million people, 1 million people left in the first year. And Fidel Castro, the dictator at the time, the first thing he did was close the churches, close the Catholic schools, expelled priests and nuns. And my family was seeing this happen before their very eyes, and they were distraught. One of the priests from America offered an alternative to families, and it's an alternative that I can't imagine, but it was called Operation Peter Pan, and some of you may know about this, but it was the largest exodus of children in the Western Hemisphere, in the history of the Western Hemisphere. 15,000 children participated, and basically what it was is the remaining nuns and priests that were in Cuba said, we understand that you can't leave, but you can't get visas to leave, but your children can. Your children don't require visas. So what we'll do is we will house your children in the United States in either foster care or orphanages, and then it will free you up to eventually, hopefully, for you to get out. Yeah. And my parents, my mom, I won the lottery with my parents. And she made what I can't imagine the most difficult decision of her life, which was she sent her children ahead of her, not knowing if she would ever get out. And she shares the story, she shared the story with us before she died, that when she put my sisters on that airplane from Havana to Miami, she said, Virgin Mother, they're your children now. And so she entrusted us to the care of the Virgin Mother and to the faith that we're so blessed to have inherited. We ended up in Philadelphia, and this is basically why we live here. We ended up in Cabrini Orphanage and St. Vincent's Orphanage. And long story short, my parents were able to get out, and 6 months later, we were reunited as a family, and we settled in a place down the street from here, Wayne, Pennsylvania. I attended school at St. Catherine's before the big church came down and was rebuilt with the modern church. And, you know, they always told us that we were so blessed to have come to America, because in Cuba they never imagined that this could happen. And we see it happening now in Venezuela, we see it happening in other countries.
Yes.
But they said, if not America, where?
Right.
Where?
Exactly.
That's what we were kind of discussing, folks, before we came on the air. If people from around the world wanted to come to a place where there was every kind of freedom you can think of, where would it be? And the answer is always the United States of America, the oldest democracy in the world. And as I said earlier, we're 244 years old today, and that's a drop in the bucket to countries where we're from, especially in Italy, where you drive by the Colosseum, which is 2,000 plus years old, and people are living in homes that were built in the year 1200, and you know, they have air conditioning in those homes now. It's interesting that this country is still so young, yet offers so many opportunities. I guess what I'd like to say next is how my grandparents fostered my Catholicism. Again, Grandma Mary, who taught me opera and classical music. She had a most gorgeous voice. If you looked at us standing side by side, I'm 6'4", 250 pounds, and she was 4'11", 235 pounds, and just absolutely gorgeous.
And she sang, and tell us about your singing voice.
Well, we're not going to go about my singing voice. I didn't inherit that, but I inherited her husband's head, Grandpa Carmelo. So, but she had a great soprano voice that she would sing opera and so forth, just doing housework, because she had 7 children with my mom as the oldest. And but she loved church. She loved to go to church, and I would take her. And at first, as a teenager, it was kind of boring, and I know I'd go to church on Sunday, but all of a sudden I found myself going to church every day. And in our parish, our priest started looking at me as potentially a vocation, until we started going to they started in the late 50s, now I'm dating myself, as a teenager, I would go to the confraternity dances, the sock hops. And when I would not come with one young lady, I would come with 2. They said, we lost him. But thank God, God led me in the correct direction. Unfortunately, my grandparents didn't live long enough to see my vocation as a permanent deacon, which is one of the greatest blessings I've ever received, because it's the sacrament of service that priests and deacons have in our vocation for holy orders. And I think my grandparents, with their great work ethic, taught me about service. Yes. And service is always faith-based. Don't you agree?
Always,
Don't you agree?
always. What you touched on before you even started to speak, one of the most beautiful blessings I've had from my grandparents is faith.
Mm-hmm.
They brought with them their faith-filled lives from Italy, and instilled that in every sacrament I made in our daily life. And always how you treat others.
And you still wear some of the
Oh, yes, I have
some-
many treasures.
measure treasures from your grandparents. I
Italy.
remember you told me about that, and we
Over
hold
100
those
years
crucifix and the Blessed Mother or whoever, we hold
Yes.
them so dear to us because of what they represent, not only what they represent, but who they represented before they now represent us.
You know, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just thinking, you know, the church aims high, and we fall short because of our humanity. And but it's always that reach that we are challenged to grasp. And I think about our country, and our country aims high, and it of course is flawed like every country because of our humanity. But I think the beauty of our country on this 4th of July is, and we've talked about this, is that we're always striving to better and to correct the mistakes of our past, be it slavery, be it prejudice towards groups. I mean, racism and prejudice isn't confined to, it was present in all
Yes.
All nationalities.
nationalities when
Yes.
they came to this country.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
but at the same time, what a land of opportunity. What a wonderful, wonderful place this country is. You know, in our family, all of us were raised in the United States. We all had the opportunity of an education and to better ourselves. And most of us married people of various other cultures, and I married an Irish girl.
Me too.
Irish and French.
There you go, and that's the beauty of it, you know. So, but just what a blessing.
It really is, and we can't lose sight of it. There's just so many things of beauty within our country, but one of the things that we have to be mindful of is we have to face reality of what's going on in our country today. And you know, all lives matter. We're all precious children of God. And you know, Jesus said to us very simply, love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And then he said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Those are so much, it sounds so simple, but why is it so difficult? It's just, you know, I grew up in an Italian Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn, near Coney Island, and it was wonderful having friends who were of different cultures, who ate different food, and we were all like family. And I miss that.
Yeah.
I miss that terribly. And, you know, when, Juan, you talk about the land of opportunity, when I was in high school, I didn't get that football to Notre Dame University and then become an All-American and then get drafted by the Green Bay Packers in order to play for Vince Lombardi, who lived 4 blocks from where I grew up. That wasn't going to happen. So I joined the Navy instead and saw the world. But I was confused at first. I didn't know what to do. And my beautiful mother said this to me. I said, Mom, I'm really unsure of what to do. Maybe I'll just wait until my ship comes in. And she said this to me. Sometimes you have to row out and meet that ship.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that as long as I live. So friends, parents and grandparents, you might want to use that with your own children because it's perfect. And I thought about it and I prayed about it, and at 18 years old, I found myself halfway around the world. Halfway around the world. Well, I spent 4 years in the Navy and never spent one day on a ship. I flew everywhere. It was great. And that's another story we'll talk about sometime on another Saturday. But sometimes we have to listen to that motherly advice and fatherly advice and grandparent advice. But sometimes we have to give that advice to our children, especially when it comes to faith-based issues. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, is there anything you want to add?
No, I
Anything else?
just
How we
want to
doing?
wish everyone a very blessed 4th of July and love each other, take care of each other, and God bless you all.
Beautiful. Juan?
Thank you. No, thank you. Couldn't have said it better. Happy 4th of July, everyone.
Yes. My sisters and brothers, the Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
And may Almighty God bless all of you and all of us in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
God bless everybody. Tune in next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.